Cannabis is a very controversial drug, which is still heavily burdened by prejudice in our society. After the election, a government was formed that wants to legalize cannabis. So this topic becomes more and more present, but is a legalization at all sensible? This and more in our video. Cannabis is the name given to the female parts of the hemp plant, which can cause an intoxicating effect. The two most important active substances are tetrahydrogencannabinol THC and cannabidiol CBD. These active ingredients make our body release happy hormones, which is also the reason why you can get addicted. Also, when you inhale, many pollutants get into the lungs, and that is why it is considered harmful to health and illegal. However, this prohibition is of little use. After all, cannabis is the most commonly consumed drug in Germany. In order to weaken the black market, to protect consumers and also to earn money with it, the drug should now be legalized. To understand why cannabis is illegal, we have to look at the history. Why is cannabis illegal? There was never a single defined reason why marijuana was banned, and the ban went on for so long. Some think that it could have a racist background, others think it is because of the competition with alcohol, and because prohibition failed, the government needed something else. There were no precise or well-established reasons in the 1930s. Most likely it was more about moral reasons. The first time cannabis was mentioned in German law was in 1872. In this law, or rather, this regulation, it was stated that cannabis could only be sold in pharmacies, but it was still legal. The Opium Commission, founded in 1909, wants to curb the cannabis trade in 1912. The reason for this is a proposal by the Italian government, which would like to regulate cannabis uniformly with the drugs morphine, opium and cocaine. Cultivation, possession and trade should become punishable. However, this request was withdrawn by the Italian government before they could receive a response. Nonetheless, cannabis makes it into the conference's final declaration. On January 13, 1912, it was decided to draft a regulation for the trade in cannabis soon. In Germany, however, no efforts are made to regulate, as the consumption of cannabis for intoxicating effects is very little widespread. Cannabis is mainly used as a pain reliever. At the 1925 Opium Conference, the Egyptian delegation leader El Gindi pushed for an international ban on cannabis. In an exclusion in December 1924, a ban on cannabis was voted on. 6 votes for a ban and 3 against. Germany was not in the cannabis subcommittee. This vote was a big step towards international illegalization. On February 19, 1925, cannabis was included in the International Convention on Narcotic Drugs. Unfortunately, this agreement forced Germany to enact effective laws to restrict the use of cannabis so that cannabis can only be used for medical purposes. After 4 years, the advance will be implemented in Germany. A law is passed which makes the use of cannabis a criminal offense. This law is the predecessor of today's Narcotics Act. Our current law is based on this law, which is more than 90 years old, and can therefore be seen as the beginning of illegalization in Germany. 42 years later, there is the first legal change in the ban on cannabis. The Opium Act becomes today's Narcotics Act on December 22, 1971. 100 years after cannabis was first regulated, the Narcotics Act came into force in January 1972. Since then there have always been small changes, but one thing always stays the same: the cultivation, trading, purchase and possession of cannabis are punishable in Germany. However, there is now hope for legalization again. It began on March 10, 2017 that the sale of cannabis on prescription for the seriously ill was allowed again. More on the current situation in cannabis politics later. But does a legalization make sense? Here are a few arguments for legalizing cannabis and a few against it. Contra legalization. Cannabis can cause psychosis. Cannabis is harmful to the health of our lungs. Cannabis can affect everyone differently. Cannabis can make you addicted. In recent years, the THC content has increased enormously. Cannabis has therefore become significantly stronger. How this affects the body and the psyche in the long term has not yet been adequately researched. Pro-legalization. The ban does not minimize consumption. In 1979, 17% of all Germans had cannabis experience, today, over 30%. Cannabis is not more harmful than alcohol. Cannabis has many positive and beneficial effects. It can also be used medicinally. Cannabis has been built and consumed in Europe for more than 3,000 years. Legalization relieves the authorities and promotes the state through the controlled sale of cannabis via head shops and pharmacies. This can protect consumers from toxins and make the government a lot of money. Legalization has already worked in countries such as Canada. In Canada, cannabis has been legal for 3 years now. Thus, one can see the first successes of legalization. Marijuana may only be grown there under many strict rules and sold only in state dispensaries. Because of the high prices and the many rules, every second person still buys illegally. However, these numbers are decreasing year by year. Much more important is the protection of young people, which has worked excellently. The number of young cannabis users has remained the same. It has not happened that young people can now buy the drug more easily or that consumption has become more normal for them. So it's a win-win situation. There is better control among adults, and among youth, cannabis has not become more attractive. A coalition of SPD, FDP and Greens has been formed after the elections in September. One topic on which there is great agreement is cannabis legalization. For this, the Greens have already presented the most detailed plan, a cannabis control law. In this, they are in favor of being allowed to carry a quantity of 30 grams, a sale in licensed specialist stores and a ban on advertising, similar to tobacco. It should only be sold to people who are over 18 years old. All in all, similar to Canada. In their proposal, they assume €2 billion in tax revenue and €1.8 billion in law enforcement savings. This money could also counteract the losses from the corona pandemic, but consumer protection is still the priority. Cannabis legalization is an increasingly important issue as a coalition has been formed to allow marijuana. Accordingly, everyone should have dealt with it once. This is also the reason why we have chosen this topic. Furthermore, we find that the legalization has unfortunately been given little attention for a long time. For us, the arguments of consumer protection but also of economic profitability prevail. Fortunately, the time is coming soon. Thank you for watching.